Yeah, so I would look back and say, yeah, I was a normal kid growing up, but I had this underlying anxiety no matter what I did, and always had this sense of probably not feeling safe in the world that I couldn't describe until later, but I always had this sense that something was going to happen. One of the issues I had when I became an addict was then looking back on my past, because I had like loving parents. My parents are amazing, they're still together. I've got an older brother who was awesome. So it's like you look back on your life and go, I had this great childhood. What the fuck, why am I so messed up right now? I think we idealise our childhood a lot and tend to block out the things that didn't go quite right. And for me, it was just so much anxiety, so much not feeling safe. I had an issue with sitting with myself. Yeah, so if I stopped and just did nothing, I would start, that anxiety would just be like 10 out of 10 basically. So I was never still for, God, 30 years. Because the present moment scared the shit out of me. And I thought everyone else was like that, which is the weird thing, because I don't, like I said before, I'm not in other people's heads and minds. So I'm like, this is just how I live life and how other people live life as well. I remember I took my first ecstasy tablet. It was my 20th birthday. And I'd always sworn, I'm like, I'd never do that stuff, never do that stuff. And then some friends had started doing it and I'm like, oh, I'll give it a try. And it's like, as soon as I had that first pill, I'm like, holy shit, this is the most incredible feeling I've ever had. So I didn't realize I was in such a pit in my normal like day-to-day life, in my internal world, that when I took a drug like that, it lifted me up so much and it brought my walls down so much. So I was married for a few years. We were together for about 10 years. And then we had just kind of drifted apart. We both had our own stuff going on. You know, I had a lifetime of this accumulated stuff that I hadn't dealt with. And so once the marriage broke down in 2014, I just went out of control. It was like the straw that broke the camel's back. So I've got this lifetime of undealt with emotions. The classic male, I'm just sweep everything under the rug, everything's fine, everything's fine. Like people that ask me, even close mates throughout my life, hey, is everything all right? I'll be like, yeah, I'm fine. Let's talk about you. let me deflect, right? And I'd always say to myself, I'm like, I'll deal with my stuff later. After the marriage breakdown, you know, I had been using ice before that and GHB, but like I had held it down a job previously and I'd been functional, so to speak. I became really unfunctional after that. I started using every day. My usage crept up and up. I ran through whatever money I had really quickly, which happens in that world. I started dealing drugs to support my habit. I was living out in a drug house in the eastern suburbs. I was dating a girl who was a dealer as well. And things just spiraled out of control. On top of all the anxiety and the unresolved stuff from my past, I now had all this guilt and shame about what I was doing. And guilt and shame are like two of the biggest drivers of addiction. So I shut out my close friends and family. So, you know, my family, my parents who I'm really close with, I just didn't talk to them for about a 6-month period. Best mates, they had found out the house that I was staying in. And then I had my phone starts going off and it's like, hey mate, we're out at the front door, like, come out. And I remember the feeling, it was just horrible. And my two best mates are literally on the other side of the door, I'm inside. I couldn't face them because I couldn't let them see who I was. And my phone was on silent so they couldn't hear, and I crawled from the bedroom out into the hallway, which is the only room in the house where there wasn't any windows, and my dog's barking and I'm trying to get him to come sit in the hallway, and I just sat there like hands on my head like this, couldn't face them, and they knocked at the door for 10 or 15 minutes or so and then they left. At that point I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? One of the hardest things I've ever done was then letting mum and dad back in and going around to their house one night and telling them what had happened. That's hard, because you don't want your parents to think they're responsible in any way. Yet to rock up and say, your son's a drug addict. He's been arrested for dealing and trafficking drugs. He's written off his car because he overdosed at the wheel. Life's a mess, basically. But that being said, I had their support as well. So I was very, very fortunate to have that support, but I wasn't ready to reach out until I'd had that moment. I sort of decided I wanted to get clean mainly because I knew I had a court case coming up. I still couldn't envision myself being clean and being happy. Yeah, it's like I knew I could stop, but I always thought I can stop, but there's just going to be a void in my life. I ended up in the office of an old acquaintance, Melissa, where I was able to resolve why I had that void in the first place. I spent about 3 hours in her office. We spoke about drugs for 2 or 3 minutes, if that. The rest we went back to different emotional pains, traumas, things from my past that I hadn't been able to deal with. And I was able to actually let go of so much emotion and so much stuff from my past. I cried for the first time, and I hadn't cried for over 10 years. I was able to let that go. So not only was I starting to cry and let all these emotions go, but I was able to actually accept and love myself for who I was for the first time in my life. And that was the moment. I was sitting in her office and everything went quiet. I just didn't say anything for a while. And then I had my eyes shut, I was sort of leaning back. And she's like, what's happening now? And I said, I'm completely and utterly 100% with myself, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be. And so that was the moment that I became present for the first time ever. And that was the moment that I knew I didn't need to take drugs anymore. And I didn't know what the future held, because externally my life was a complete mess. Criminal charges, written off the car, health, money, everything was a mess. But something inside said to me, it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right.